webinar. We are going to give it another minute or two just so that everyone gets a chance to join us, in case there are a couple of stragglers. Again, for anybody who's joining right now, we are just going to start the webinar in another, let's say, 2 minutes to give everybody an opportunity to kind of join in, just in case anyone is running a few minutes late. All right. We are now 3 minutes past the hour, and I wanted to welcome everybody to the Stepping Up to Legal Digital Transformation panel session. I was about to call it a webinar, not quite a webinar, but pretty close. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. With that, first thing on the agenda is if I would like to just introduce the panel session today, and you see everybody kind of live just above the session there. So why don't we start with a couple of introductions. Let me start myself. My name is Charles Dimov. I'm the Vice President of Marketing, Global Marketing for Contract Pod AI. We are a contract lifecycle management solution provider, and we are just introducing new aspects to contract management all the time. So very, very exciting time for us. Specifically, actually, interesting time also in this COVID pandemic that we're all going through. All of us are suffering through. And specifically, it's interesting because, frankly, it makes us all stop and really think about the digital transformation side and starting to say, hey, if this is a prolonged time period that we're going through, this is definitely a crux for change. How is this affecting the industry? How is this affecting legal in general, corporate legal, et cetera? So again, makes this a very, very poignant topic, and excellent to have our panelists on this. With that, Matt, can I ask you to introduce?
Thank you, Charles. Hi, I'm Matt Gould. I am the head of legal and also the head of the legal transformation team for Contract Pod AI. So I'm a qualified lawyer and run the in-house legal team, but I also run the transformation team, which consists of legal technologists and experts in the transformation field to help people on their digital journey. I'm a solicitor by background. I spent many years as general counsel for the EMEA region for Telstra, Australia's largest multinational communications company. So I'm a commercial lawyer, but also have a deep interest in legal technology.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Michael.
Thank you, Charles. Hello, everybody. Michael Green. I'm the GM of Legal for Xero, the UK and EMEA business. Xero is a small business accounting and financial platform. We were born in the cloud about 12 years ago, based in New Zealand. As you can tell by my accent, I'm a Kiwi. I moved over to the UK to head up the UK legal team in 2017, right as GDPR was on the horizon, PSD2 and open banking, and Brexit was looming. So it's been quite the ride over the last 2 years, but have a deep interest in technology and the way that we can use that to create efficiencies and scale. And so that's why I'm here today.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And Gordon.
Thanks, Charles. Hi, everyone. I'm Gordon Youngson. I'm responsible for APAC and Europe at TransferWise. And I've been in financial services for probably 15 years. I've been at TransferWise 2.5 years, and it's an exciting company to work for. It's full of technology and like driving for change. And I'm very keen on like transformational projects. We're going through some interesting projects at the moment, TransferWise, to try and improve and streamline how legal do things. So excited to be here and talking about this today.
Okay. Thank you, Gordon. That's excellent. Good. So with that, let me just start off on kind of saying a couple of the key discussion topics that we are going to chat about today are going to be, where does legal stand in relationship to digital transformation? What's taking place on that side. I do want to talk about what are some of the current obstacles. We might as well kind of face them, take a look at them and say, what are they and are there ways around them? And also quick and effective transformation techniques that, in other words, some of the best practices that maybe some of our colleagues are already using, whether it be on the panel or even if we've heard about others, and certainly from the audience, wouldn't mind at all hearing from the audience as well on that topic. Good. Now, before we get started, there are just two more things that I kind of wanted to throw up there. I love getting the ball rolling just with a couple of stats. So this is actually coming from a recent Gartner study on legal automation. And it showed that 89% reported that their organizations met or exceeded expected ROI, which is pretty interesting given that that basically means that, generally speaking, when you are deploying a legal automation system, whether it's a contract lifecycle management system or another aspect of automation, it means that typically you're going to see a positive ROI out of this, which is very, very, it speaks very well to kind of that stepping stone of digital transformation overall for the legal business. And the second thing was interesting as well out of that same study was they also kind of asked executives, not the legal team, but the other executives on the senior leadership team about their feelings. And 73% came back and said, of the executives said that they were extremely open to investments specifically in legal for legal automation, contract automation, those type of technologies. So again, pretty interesting stat to start off with, because I think a lot of times in the legal profession, there is a sense, a feeling that the legal team inside of a corporation is really seen as a cost center. That's a bit of a burden. And we certainly want to kind of change that, transform that, adjust that to maybe say, hey, it's not a cost center, it's a value center. And how do we do that? Now, again, the interesting thing is when you feel that it's a cost center, a lot of times you are a little bit reluctant to say, hey, I'm already seen as a cost center, and then I'm going to go and ask for extra funds to do this legal automation thing. I could definitely see the hesitance. However, as I said, this interesting Gartner study, when they flat out asked a bunch of executives about it, there isn't that sense. There is that sense of saying, hey, you know what? This is a business unit, just like any other business unit inside the organization, and it is worthy of investment. And frankly, if there's a way to invest and to get some kind of benefits out of it for the corporation, either cost savings or kind of pushing the company forward, that's a good thing. So again, I thought this was fascinating research by Gartner, and I thought that's a great place for us to all kind of start. So with that, whoops, let me go back. Why don't we start our panel discussion? And the panel discussion, the first question that I've got for the panel is, what is legal digital transformation? So let's just start with that. What does it mean to each one of you? And why don't I start with Michael? Kind of tell me your perspective.
Yeah, I guess if you think about technology in general, we implement technology, in my mind, to solve problems of resource and time, one side of the pillar, and then also to provide us with deeper data and insights into what we're doing. So I guess if you layer that over the legal industry in general, we're really talking about the whole end-to-end cycle for an in-house team specifically of how we're engaging with the business, what we're doing, and the way that we're reflecting on what we're doing. So that's kind of meta management, meta intake, templates, the output that we give to the business. And then so when we're thinking about, in my mind, technology and legal digital transformation, we're thinking about the tools that we can implement in different parts of that process to create efficiencies and scalability, so that we can pull ourselves out of more of the mundane work and start to focus our minds on more of the high value add work. So yeah, I guess the other side of the piece as well is then once we implement the technology to create those efficiencies, we need the technology to then be able to tell us, produce the data for us to be able to see where we're spending our time, how we're spending our time, if we're spending it in the right places, and whether that's what we should be doing to help drive future decisions.
Yeah, good perspective. That's great. Matt, how about your perspective on this? Digital transformation, what is it?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I think really feeding on from what Michael says, to me, it is actually, we use technology in all parts of our lives. I mean, certainly I've used Zoom and similar products more in the last 2 or 3 months than I had in the last 2 or 3 years. And we realized how actually you can be efficient, how you can work on a global basis, and actually having the systems and processes in place that enables a global business to work efficiently. It all exists there, but are we using it as well as we can? And I think the legal industry, in-house teams have not always been at the forefront of businesses in how you can actually use that technology. Sometimes, I mean, lawyers, we're all pretty conservative, I think, in our thinking, but really, I think at the moment we're having to use this technology, and it's there. For me, it is actually about getting out of low value work. It's about about health and wellness. It's about giving people the opportunity to focus on those things that really matter to a business, and the more mundane aspects of, I mean, frankly, an in-house lawyer. I mean, I remember staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning doing some pretty mundane contracts, and you think it's not good use of anyone's time. And I think really shouldn't have to be there. People can do it. Businesses can do that far more efficiently. And that would actually save money. So it's better for the lawyers, better for the business. And that's I think what we can all do with at the moment.
Yes, agreed. Actually, that's a good point. And Gordon, round us off. What's your feeling? What is digital transformation?
I echo a lot of the points that Michael's made and Matt's made. And for me, for those of us that can remember working in like traditional offices where you used to have filing systems and somebody would create a matter and there was lots of paper, lots of layers, lots of processes. Over the last 10 years, I've worked in law. A lot of the things that used to happen in the value chain for legal and like giving legal advice have been streamlined through either technology solutions or improvements in processes. And when I think about transforming legal, it's bringing improvements to how businesses access legal, but also how the legal team itself operates. So making sure that the cogs inside the team itself are slick, and that they're able to kind of dispense the advice and do their thing in an efficient way. And then that's also using tools where appropriate or other techniques to try and make life easy for the business. So their interaction with legal is good. And then the lawyers are also able to smoothly dispense their mechanics, their advice in the best way.
Yeah, I like the comments that kind of have come out here about, really kind of taking away some of the mundane work. And I've heard that a couple of times from a few other panels and a few other discussions on that same topic. I like that concept also, better for the lawyer, better for the company, to be able to speed things up. And frankly, I think one of the other points, aside from efficiency, is also kind of really moving up the value chain to say, don't spend your time on those mundane tasks that can be automated. Spend your time on the more strategic elements, the stuff that's kind of important to the business, so again, good resonation on that. Let me take you to the next question, which is, digital technologies enable new types of innovation and creativity. So is this type of innovation just a nice to have, or is it a must have in legal? Is it just the fact that we're going through the pandemic at the moment, and frankly, once this is over, we're all going to go back to our offices and go back to normal? Or is this is kind of important, and it's a strategic shift? And with that, I mean, Michael, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I mean, I've kind of reflected a little bit on this question. I think it's a must-have. I think legal teams of the future aren't just going to sit in the corner doing contracts and still expected to be a high contributing function of the business. So we need to find ways to pull ourselves out of the low value, high volume work that sucks up a lot of time. Anything we're doing that's repeatable, like in my mind, we need to move towards not doing. So in my mind, therefore, it's kind of a must-have. But then stepping back a little bit, I think it is very team dependent, especially when you're thinking about in-house and you're thinking about where an in-house legal team is on its journey. There's no one-size-fits-all technology in this market, and I think that's probably why you're seeing like it's quite hard to understand what technologies you should use at what stage of your evolution. So I guess I would say I think the move towards technologies in the way that we can create efficiencies and scale inside in-house legal teams, inside businesses, is a must-have, and it's the future. But then finding the right technologies for the right time for your in-house team and where you're going is a really crucial step, and not one that should be missed.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That is a good point. And Gordon, let me throw it over to your side as well. So is it a nice to have or a must have?
My initial reaction was that it's a good to have, and I say that because I agree. Like, there's so many technology solutions out there now, and it's very easy to leap at a solution. For me, what's at the heart of it is understanding what the use case is first and foremost. So there's no point, on just buying a piece of tech because it's a great piece of tech. It's actually got to fit into what the needs are of the team or the business and actually be solving a real problem. So my initial reaction, there will be some technology solutions that are out there that might not be right for a team or a business or what it needs at the moment. There's also a fair degree of fragmentation, I think, across different parts of the value chain. So it's important to take a step back and have a look at the whole value chain and what the proposition is, what the use case is first and foremost, because it might be that you need to work with a different solution, or there's a part of the problem that you're trying to solve that doesn't require a bit of tech. Maybe it does, but it's important to keep that in mind.
I think that's a really important point, Gordon. When you're looking at how to implement tools and to create efficiencies, you really need to know what the outcome is, and you need to be outcomes driven, because otherwise you might, like Gordon says, implementing a piece of technology for a problem that was never really a problem.
No, I think that's actually a really, really good point that you guys hit on directly. Yeah, at the end of the day, you're right. I think there's like practically an infinite set of different technology solutions. Well, okay, not quite, but at least a vast volume of them. And certainly you can't go and implement every single one. So I like that approach about really kind of focusing on what are the outcomes for your team and what's important to your team and your business overall, and then kind of mapping it back and saying, okay, well, here's how we get there. It's almost kind of creating a bit of a roadmap of some sort. Yeah, so that's good. Yeah, good answer. Now,
Charles, because I think one of the things that it's important to me, we've all seen IT solutions in businesses which haven't necessarily been thought through in terms of no one's quite sure what is the business outcome. And I think lawyers are just the same. We've been in projects that we sort of sit in, and I think it's about, to me, it really is about understanding what is the need, what can be done more efficiently, whether for us or for the wider business. And I think it ties back to your comment that 73% of execs are actually happy with this, because I think they understand that legal teams can be more efficient and can do things better. And ultimately that makes their lives more efficient too, and the business.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Thank you for that kind of clarification, Matt. Good. Now, actually, at this point in time, why don't we take a moment and do a poll question? So, Jonathan, if you could pull that up, our first poll, and if we can ask the audience about what their opinion is. Specifically, the first poll question is going to be, what is the obstacle that has kept you from legal digital transformation thus far? Now, if you're already down the journey and you kind of already are digitally transforming, then that's fine. Then think from the perspective of what do you perceive that is one of the biggest obstacles for most legal departments in that respect. And Jonathan, could you just confirm that you've got the poll up? Okay, yeah, I can see that the poll is going up. And again, the options that you've got there are buy-in from leadership. B is unsure of return on investment. C was not sure where to start. And then certainly too time consuming is another option. And frankly, I mean, it might be just too confusing, period, overall. So again, we'll give that about a moment or two and then see if we can see the results. Let's give that just a little bit more time. If everyone can just enter your answer, and then let's see what that comes out to. And Jonathan, do you think you can show the results at this point? Let's see if I can. Okay, there we go. So is everybody else able to see the results thus far? Yep, okay, good. So we're able to see now that, okay, what is the obstacle that has kept you from legal digital transformation thus far? And it looks that the biggest one is buy-in from leadership. That's interesting. With 50% of the audience is kind of saying, hey, buy-in from leadership is a big thing, followed by unsure of the return on investment. So that's actually really interesting, given that those were the two topics that we kind of started off with from the stats from the Gartner research, saying that, you know what, the return on investment typically on legal automation technology or contract automation technology is, exceptionally high. It was like 89%. Basically reported exceeding. And then that other stat, about 73% of executives said that they were willing to back this up. So again, interesting perspective. Let's reflect on that for a second. Any sense from you guys? Michael, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the buy-in from leadership perspective, I know that this can obviously really differ between companies and depending on where the legal team sits in the company structure as well, how new it is, how engaged it is with the business. So I fully appreciate that can potentially be a tough one. I think though, when you are really selling it to leadership, we have this, you have this tension between if you're inside a growing company, for instance, the level of work is going to continue to increase, but you're not going to get as many full-time heads to service that work as you necessarily need. So you're going to constantly be asked to do more with less. And I think framing up the argument in terms of figuring out, first of all, maybe what some of your repeatable tasks that you're doing are, where you're spending your time, and then selling it to leadership in terms of, well, hey, if we can implement X technology, I estimate that that'll take away X amount of work from my team, which will free the current resources that we have up to be able to focus on the work that we have and the work that's coming. I think the other really key selling point for leadership is scaling with the business. So you might have a team that's capable of servicing the business needs today, but you need to be thinking about servicing the business needs in 2 to 3 years' time, and not doing that by just adding more people to your team. Right. I think that's where technology becomes crucial, and selling that argument becomes really crucial to leadership. And if you're inside a technology company, that should be a really well understood piece of information, especially when we're talking about scalability.
So that actually might be, if you're going to make a recommendation to anybody, it might be to say, hey, do a little bit of a future looking pitch. To say, here's why we want to kind of get into this. Yes, maybe the beginning might be a little bit, like any project, challenging at the beginning, kind of getting adoption, et cetera, but this is going to pay dividends ultimately.
That's right.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts?
I was just going to say my reaction on that. I'm not sure if the return on investment, that's not a concept that comes naturally to all lawyers, legal teams. And I think what we found the hardest thing to do is to capture the value we're saving in some way, so that we can offset like the solution we want to implement. It's going to cost, and it's not mega bucks, but it's normally a considerable spend. And when you have that conversation with your CFO or your leadership team, they do want to see, like, what are the metrics on it? Why are we implementing this solution? And can we not just do some other short-term hack that will save us the money? And those are fair questions and fair challenges. But what we've found helps overcome that. And when we've been working to build out a contract solution, it's to pinpoint the time that it would take for a team to do the task themselves, or to somebody to sit at a desk and to review the documentation. And we've used a cost basis argument as a metric to say, actually, yes, this solution will be some outlay now, but it'll pay back its returns over 3 or 4 months. That would be my only reaction to conceptualizing what a good ROI is. That doesn't always land well. It doesn't resonate with legal teams naturally.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. That is a good perspective. Yes, Matt.
I was going to entirely agree with Gordon. I think it just shows to me that the issue is actually about how well lawyers can articulate the argument, because it's not that lawyers don't want to do this, because if it was too time consuming or it wasn't seen as worthwhile, then I think the poll would have come out differently. But it's how do you actually articulate that? Because it seems that there's an open door that the execs, if you can present the case, that execs are generally very open to signing off. So therefore, the issue must be more with the legal teams in terms of how you write that business case in the first place in order to actually demonstrate the benefits. And one of the things that I've sort of seen in previous organizations is almost this feeling that somehow you can build stuff yourself, even lawyers ending up building their own bits of technology and different teams building different bits, because somehow hours that people work is somehow not valued in the way that it's sort of somehow free, and that's easier than writing a business case. And I think probably what this says is that lawyers should think harder about how they can actually articulate it in order to get the benefits.
Yeah, that is a really key point about the hours not being valued when it's internal. Yeah, I've seen that over and over in companies, not just in the legal area, but certainly in different functions as well. So interesting points. That's good. Good. So let's move on with a couple more questions here. So digital transformation can be disruptive. Okay, for example, when you're introducing AI technology to your legal process, it's disruptive for sure. There's no other way to see it. Do you see these transformations augmenting jobs or replacing them? And I think that speaks to the AI technology specifically. I've heard a lot of opinions about this, and yeah, certainly it's exciting stuff. It's new. It's advanced technology. That's really cool. And there's always that scare factor beneath it, saying that, oh my gosh, if we implement this thing, it's going to take away my job. Is it or is it not? And with that, what Matt? Actually, why don't we start with you this time? What do you think?
Well, I think as Mike was saying, a lot of businesses are constantly expanding, they're growing. So at which point actually there is a requirement to be more efficient even within the team that you have, because you're simply required to do more with the same resource. So it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be taking heads out, but you need to be aware that the capacity of the team is going to come under more scrutiny. So, and to me, this is also about the wellness argument in terms of actually freeing time up for individuals as well, in terms of not having to work silly hours. So you and actually being able, for example, to job share better, for example, being able to pass work around a team in order to avoid some of the low value work. So it has all those sort of slightly intangible bases, which of course then goes back, in fact, to how that it's sometimes hard to write the business case around that, because business cases tend to be about we can save money because we need fewer people. But you could also save money by not needing to overflow your work and spend so much money on external law firms. So there are other ways that you can actually demonstrate savings within a team in order that actually the business can train itself. So I think plenty of ways to think about it.
Frankly, I always think that given the amount of the sheer volume of work that most lawyers and attorneys I've seen have been working, I don't think losing your job is really the big concern. But again, that's purely my opinion. Michael, let me throw it onto your side. What do you think?
Yeah, so I guess just following on, I think from my point of view, it's not technology is never about replacing jobs. It's about replacing repeatable tasks. Yes. So as we've already said over and over again, we can focus on the more high value add work. And so from a Xero example, we're a cloud accounting software. When we came into existence, there was a lot of questions around how do we manage to work so closely with accountants? We actually sell 80% of our product through accountants, when a large part of what we do is replacing some of the services that they do on a yearly, monthly basis. And the answer to that, I guess, is we're not replacing what they do. We're actually enabling them to focus on higher value add services to their clients so that their clients can grow, and then they can focus on growing their own business as well, which is ultimately better for the client, for them, and for the economy. And I think the same applies to the legal industry. And I guess to put it frankly, if we're not innovative enough to be able to adapt the way that we work to providing those more high value adds and strategic services, then maybe we should be losing our jobs, I guess.
All right, that's good. Well, thank you. I like that concept about specifically, and you've said it a couple of times, which I think is very, very, a key message, which is replacing the repeatable tasks and replacing the mundane tasks, and really kind of. I believe you're right. This technology is really meant to kind of get lawyers and attorneys really to be kind of moving up that value chain and doing more strategic work, more business oriented work, which I think is absolutely the right approach. And that's really what I believe that most AI technology is really kind of out to do anyway. It's not. I don't think anybody kind of builds it with the intention of saying, "Hey, I want to take the job away from a lawyer." Probably not going to happen. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But making the job much more interesting and kind of making you much more impactful for the company, I think that's where it really, really does kind of resonate, which is good. So you've hit on a really key point. Let me throw out another question here. So for digital transformation to succeed in legal, you need to set well-defined outcomes. And that kind of comes back to one of the earlier questions. I think it was you, Michael, who mentioned that the outcome side. So good. Now, what are some of the key metrics and KPIs that are important to all corporate legal teams? Tough question. And with that one, because I know how diverse it can be. So Gordon, let me pick on you. And why don't you start off the conversation on that one? What are some key KPIs that are important to any legal department?
Sure. This is one that legal teams find really hard to document and to conceptualize in a way that businesses understand it. Like what you're ultimately wanting to show is how you demonstrate value. And like the value of the lawyers for us, we've gone through this at TransferWise. It's like a combination of a lot of things. It's about like the money that you're spending, and the business obviously sees the top line as what's going out. And then what we want to try and do is like make us better at our jobs. We call this like legal drag. And then we also want the organization to have less legal liability. So we've come up with this way of like, we think we can try and measure legal value looking at those three key aspects. Other organizations I've worked in, it's been really hard. It's like, is it the number of filings we missed this quarter? Is it the number of contracts executed without a signature? Is it because nobody wants it to be just on the money. Or the headcount. So it's challenging for organizations to get to the bottom of how they measure value and how you build KPIs around the legal team.
Yeah, tough question for sure. And Matt, let me get your opinion on that one.
I was laughing actually listening to Gordon for exactly the same reasons. Trying to get KPIs that work for lawyers that also work for a business. I mean, it's why so many law firms, even today, the only thing they can charge by is by the hour, because apart from time, they really, even law firms struggle actually to charge by value. Accountants have worked it out, but lawyers haven't. Once you put that into an in-house team, when it's actually so much about supporting other parts of the business, being as efficient as possible, you can of course have your turnaround times in terms of responding to a client in a certain amount of time, helping the sales teams, helping procurement, whatever. But it's very hard to articulate. But I think that you understand it when you get it, because it is actually about efficiency, and it's then about the health and wellness of the team. And that tends to be when people are doing good work, they're doing good jobs. And the rest of the business understands that the value is being created. And then that actually, it's hard to measure, but I think a business knows when it's there. And I like Gordon, struggle to articulate it in a different business I've worked in. People have tried different KPIs and they shift every now and again, but it's hard.
Just picking up from that, I think one piece that I've always thought of when it comes to KPIs and in-house teams, what I really wanted to steer away from implementing is KPIs around turnaround times, specifically because what I think that an in-house team should be is a really key strategic business partner, not an outside-in service provider. And the more KPIs that you set in place like that, the more you set yourself up looking kind of like an external law firm providing advice into the business. I think what's really key for in-house legal teams is to show how you're driving the strategy and vision of the business. And that's a really, as Gordon and Matt have said, it's a really difficult thing to show. And so I think one particular element, though, that might be really relevant from a technological perspective is implementation of meta management systems, or even tracking it yourself manually, in terms of a bit of a heat mapping exercise to see where you spend your time, what teams are taking most of your attention, and whether the work that you're doing is aligned to specific strategic priorities of the business or not. And I think that's a really useful metric to help frame up what you should and shouldn't be doing as a legal team, but not a KPI as such.
Yeah, that actually is a really interesting idea, the heat mapping about where you're spending your time and such. That's neat. Yeah, definitely perhaps one of the things that maybe more organizations need. And I would say that goes beyond just legal teams, but again, good recommendation on that. Excellent. At this point, actually, why don't we do another audience poll question? And Jonathan, if you could pull up the second poll question. So the second one is going to take us now into a little bit of more of a financial kind of direction, which is how long do you think it takes to recoup a financial investment in legal digital transformation technology? So, and again, the options there are less than 1 year, 1 year to 2 years, basically 1 to 2 years, or 2 to 3 years. What is the feeling from the audience? And again, you should see the poll questions up. We'll give everybody a moment to just kind of think about that. What do you think is your financial, as a financial investment on legal technology for digital transformation? What's that payback period?
Well, while everybody's voting on that, I'm just going to put my hand up and say, didn't realize that I'd left a dressing gown in the background of my working from home office. So apologies for that.
Well, that's neat. I hadn't noticed it personally, but that's good.
Now that you've mentioned it, we're not judging you, Michael. Don't worry.
At least you'd remember to take it off, Michael.
Could have been worse.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it kind of looks like we are closing in on a 2 to 3 year period. Is most of the audience, 46%, are saying 2 to 3 years is what that payback period is, and the second most is 1 to 2 years. So again, yep, that's right. In fact, I was kind of thinking just before the webinar started that you remember that Gartner study that I referred back to. They actually did ask that as well, and I think that was of it was either 300 or 500 different corporations, same thing of their legal teams in terms of legal automation technology and contract automation technology. And their answer came out to 2.4 years being their payback period. So again, pretty interesting just to reflect on that. And the audience actually seems to think pretty close to that as well, 2 to 3 years. And frankly, anywhere from 1 to 3 years seems like a pretty reasonable period of time for that payback. So interesting perspective there. Now, with that, why don't we go back and into the next question, which is for digital transformation to succeed in. Nope, I'm sorry, I already asked that one. So let's reflect back on that Gartner study. You remember what I had mentioned. I said that the legal automation or contract automation had shown that 89% reported in their organizations that they either exceeded or they met ROI expectations. And then we also said that a further 73% of the executives said that they were extremely open to further investments in legal automation or contract automation technology. In that light, how would you best convince your executive team on the need for legal automation? So what's that key component that you're in front of the board, you're in front of the senior leadership team, what's it going to take to be able to convince them? And Gordon, why don't we start with yourself?
Again, going back to the example of what you need, like metrics for us is key. You've got to have a really good and clear data set to show the executive team
right.
how this is going to add value and how it's actually going to picking up things like the ROI, the time it's going to save with business teams and the legal teams. For me, it's absolutely about the numbers and the organization we're in. Particularly heightened, when there's a lot of focus now on resourcing and trying to do more with less in these unusual circumstances, right? Businesses have a lot of constraints, so you got to have your numbers right, and you got to be able to show that you have a strong use case for fixing a problem. That you've looked at other options, you've looked at other ways of trying to fix this, and this is actually the best solution for the business.
Okay, that's good. So really kind of lay out the options and kind of say, this is what we need to be able to hit these targets, and this is the best solution that we've found to be able to do that. How about you, Matt? What is your perception?
Yeah, and I think it's also showing the benefits to the execs themselves. And a lot of execs travel all over the world, yet they're required on their phones or whatever to provide sign-offs, to take pretty instantaneous decisions, and using technology in order to give the comfort to people who are being asked to sign off on contracts that really they may not have very much knowledge about. They haven't been involved in the process, but because of something that's involved, they do actually, their level of approval is required under business delegations. The more that they know that it's been tracked properly, the security, the comfort of knowing that all the other lower down approvals have been obtained, that the right efficiency has happened, and that's all been recorded within a system, gives them the level of comfort that actually if they've just at an airport or whatever, they can click on their phone and go, yeah, that's fine, in that knowledge that they're not just being asked on a whim. So I think you can actually play to senior execs that if you have the underlying technology to give that gives them that comfort and security. And I've also found that when you're working with other teams, for example, the sales teams or the procurement divisions, giving them systems in a way that they can integrate what they're doing with what we're doing, so Salesforce, for example, into e-signatures, to actually make what they're doing as efficient as well, helps the lawyers, but also helps their interaction with their clients, with the third parties, prospects, what have you. So I think that it's actually it's better to not treat this solely as a legal issue, but actually broader within the business. And what I've also found is that those other areas tend to have far larger budgets than the lawyers do. So if you can actually get them to somehow think that it's their idea, then they'll end up helping you with the funding.
Oh, I like that idea. That's a clever tactic. It's always nicer to use somebody else's money. Yes, absolutely. That's good. And I do think that you hit on a really important topic. I mean, if there's an opportunity to be able to partner with one of the other teams, and certainly being able to express that business value to the other executives, and of course, the nice little line also about saying, hey, if they think they thought up this idea, even better. At the end of the day, you want the outcome, which is like you've got the new system, which is helping your team get better, faster, et cetera. That's key. Michael, let me throw it over to you as well.
Yeah, not too much more to add than what we discussed earlier and what Matt and Gordon have already said, but mostly just really focusing on justifying the investment. So really giving a clear picture on what it is that you do today that can be solved, and then giving the 2 to 3 year view. If it's not solved, how many more people you might need in your team to be able to continue to operate in the way that you're operating. And then you've got a really clear, 2 clear points in which to show if we do implement X technology or Y technology or streamline this process, this is how much time can be saved. And that actually becomes a financial gain for the business in the long term. Right. So justifying the investment from start to finish and where you want to be in a few years' time, I think is really key.
Good perspective. So let me round off with maybe one of our last questions before we kind of open it up to the audience for any last questions from there as well. So one of my final questions here is, before you start a legal digital transformation project in your legal practices, in your company, what are 2 things that every GC should be doing? So in other words, think back to before you started your own digital transformation projects in your companies and just say, hey, I kind of wish that I had done this. So 2 things I'm looking for each one of you. What do you think?
I can jump in first there, guys.
Absolutely.
So I think one we've already touched on quite a bit, which is define the outcomes. Define the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, or you'll go down a rabbit hole that you won't be able to come out of, and solve for problems that aren't necessarily problems. 2, and I'm going to be cheeky here and say 3, I think, because 3 is a better number. 2, canvas the business for how you engage with them, how they would like to engage with legal, but also for their experiences and implementation of technology in their teams. You've got to assume that there's other people around the business who have done digital transformation projects and are good at it. And you can really, I think, tap into those learnings instead of trying to reinvent the wheel yourself as an in-house legal team. And then 3, and one I think was really, really important, is to look at the technologies that your company is using. And try and gel with those as much as you can. The last thing you want to do is introduce some really different clunky piece of software that doesn't integrate with any of your current systems, because then you're kind of creating this technology off to the side that people have to engage with and that they might not want to. So to the extent that you can think about how you can utilize current technologies with new legal tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're hitting on a really important part. The integrations are sometimes absolutely key just to kind of getting adoption inside the company. So that's good. Anyway, let me not say anything else in case I'm taking another point away. Matt, why don't we flip it over to you? What are your thoughts?
I think it was sort of a point mentioned, but it's actually working out what it is that you want to automate. It's actually that existential question. What is it that you actually want to, the outcomes driven, but what is it that we're trying to do? But the second thing is actually about forcing the business and the team to really work things like approval processes out, making sure that all your precedents are in good state. Because in a lot of the even pretty big corporations I've worked in, some of that stuff is not as good as it should be. And it's like anything, if you start to automate something that's a bit, or has been stuck together with sticking plasters in the first place, actually get your house in order first so that you've actually done the work, so you've got something that's clean, and then you can then automate it. And from then on, you really get the benefits of of an efficient organization rather than something that's a little bit cobbled together.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Work out the processes. That's I find a lot of times there is a temptation to jump in. There's that excitement, there's that a certain momentum that you've kind of built up and stuff, and people kind of want to just, hey, dive in, bring this thing on, let's get moving with this thing. I want to start using it already. But it's a really good point that you just made in terms of saying, yeah, actually, it's almost one of those chicken and egg questions, which is, should I fix the process first, or do we deploy the technology? And kind of, you almost really have to do both a little bit. But not to forget that, hey, the process, either you should get that, ramped up or kind of, fixed up, or be expecting that you're going to be adjusting it along the way as well. And that's an easy point for a lot of people to forget, that process is so important. And again, it's not just legal, it's across the corporations, but, specific to us in legal for sure. Good. And Gordon, what are your thoughts on this? What do you wish you had done? What are the 2 points on your side?
I'm gonna be cheeky and do 3 because Michael.
Okay, awesome. Not to be one up.
knowing and finding your stakeholders. I think stakeholder engagement is critical to any project. So if you think you've got everybody on board with your project, assuming that you haven't, there'll be other teams that you'll need to get buy-in from who may have an interest in the technology. So it's not just about the team you want to implement the technology for. It's everyone from your finance team, your IT, existing tech solutions within the business, and the teams that own those things. And bringing them on board with you to implement digital change don't underestimate how challenging that can be. But equally, if you have them on board, it's going to go a lot smoother and faster. And then, that, like Michael said, the technology that's there, we looked at the market to try and get some stuff in, and we found, actually, we can build something very simple off the back of Jira, right, using a tool that was already there in place. So explore what your organization uses already. If you've got Slack, there's lots of other things you can do to build notifications and to share know-how into your organizations. That's one thing that we looked at. And then the other point is, the final point, have your use case very clear, right?
Yes.
So make sure you've done your research. You know what problem you're solving. Like Michael said, don't solve for problems that don't exist. But if you do have a strong use case, that'll get you over the line to getting stakeholders on board.
Yeah. Some really, really key points. Thank you, gentlemen. Define your outcomes, I think, is a resonant theme that keeps coming up. Canvas the business. So in other words, get that feedback from your partners, from the other business units as well. Make sure that they're kind of integrated with this. I think that helps a lot with the adoption. Figuring out what you want to automate and what processes as well. So again, some really, really key points here. That's awesome, and some good pointers for the audience for sure, for anybody who hasn't already kind of gone down this path and started their own journey. So good. Now with that, let me just sort of flip back to our slides. There's our slide on looking at that Gartner study we talked about. So I do want to kind of thank everybody first of all, and also just say a couple of comments. So from our side, if, one of the things, of course, is if you are looking at a digital transformation process within your own company, specific to the contract management space, that's a big chunk of what a lot of companies are doing these days. Very, very popular because it's a place that a lot of companies are finding that is the legal processes are really helping their legal departments and their business overall considerably. Please do reach out to us. I mean, we're Contract Pod AI. We do this, kind of for a living. Our CLM is one of the best in the industry, and we actually also really pride ourselves specifically about the digital transformation process. So we have a very nice process in place. In fact, that's what we're showing on the slide there. Getting you, we kind of think of it in three kind of big chunks or big kind of areas. One is getting you transformation ready, so assessing where you're at. Figuring out the outcomes. We talked about the outcomes a little bit earlier, for sure. That popped up a lot. And actually having a bit of a blueprint to say, how do I get from where we're at to where we have to get to, or where my outcomes are. The other thing is the transformation delivery process itself. Again, we talked on this panel about integration and being so key. That's one of the areas that we think it's very important for a vendor to be able to help there and be there with you every step of the way. And then finally, at the end, don't forget the transformation success. How do you get that adoption going, et cetera? And then what happens after it's already kind of deployed, making sure that you've got a customer success team there to help you along the way every once in a while when there are things that you just have to come back and say, hey, could you train us a little bit more on this, or how do I adjust this element, et cetera? So again, do look for that. The other thing as well that, hey, I'm going to mention also is when you're going down this journey, one of the things that everybody's excited about is getting the process running quickly. And one of the very key elements is making sure that you've got some of those early successes on the digital transformation process. We pride ourselves in being able to kind of get up a CLM within 10 days up and operating, which is great for 500 critical contracts. Again, very important from a lot of the customers who have worked with us. We found that this is really key elements. And again, we just want to kind of throw that out there. So again, if you are looking to start your digital transformation process and journey, reach out to us, Contract Pod AI. We're here and love to help. And with that, the two things that I'll do is one, certainly open it up to the audience. But before I do that, I do want to thank my panelists. Thank you so much. You guys have been absolutely wonderful. Very insightful thoughts in terms of what what we should be doing, and everything from really raising the level of what the attorney and what the legal department should be doing, kind of raising the value of that department from doing a lot of times it is the mundane, a lot of the tons of the work, to much higher value, much higher business value for the corporation. So, in fact, there is one question coming out here. Oh, no, sorry, that person's just telling us that they have to drop. Some good feedback there. Excellent. And a note to the Kiwi colleagues. So, good to hear on that side. Are there any questions from the audience? Again, please feel free to throw it into the chat right now. Okay. Well, with that, in that case, I will again say thank you, gentlemen. It has been a very insightful session, and we will be posting this actually on the Contract Pod AI website within the next couple of days. So if you do have any, if you wanted to come back and kind of relook at some of the notes or jot down some of the other thoughts in terms that maybe you didn't kind of jot down quickly enough, feel free to do that. We also will send a copy of the presentation to all those people who have attended this webinar. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks,
See you guys.
Charles.
Thank you.
Charles.
Bye-bye.